Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Health Movement Podcast. I'm Derek, your host. I'm a teacher of over 20 years and a certified personal trainer. Uh, this guest I have with me today, I am so excited to talk to her. But before I introduce her, just remember we are not doctors. So before you go changing any programming or anything like that, please check with your physician. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever it happens to
Sometimes.
be. Just like, follow, subscribe, comment, the whole spiel. So, all right, without any further ado, and before I fumble over my words anymore, with us today, I have Darlene Wilson, who is someone who did something incredibly remarkable. And I guess I don't really know a better way to say it than that. And we'll get into the story. But Darlene, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here today. So this is
Yes.
going to be
Now,
fun. Yep.
I want to get a little background before we kind of dive into one of, I'm sure, many accomplishments that you've done. But can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what got you to where you are now?
Sure. And so, I'm a mom first and foremost.
Mhm.
I have two kids, 25 and 23 years old, and married to my husband, Mike. And anyway, I had worked for years, full time, you know, career mom. Was very busy, but I wanted to find some balance in that. And what I did find actually was. Back when my children were younger, after I'd actually given birth to my second child, I got into running, got into sort of health and fitness, and just it kind of just spiraled. And it just grew and grew. I became more and more passionate about it, and so it really has become a very significant part of my life. And just endurance sports, health activities, things like that. And I had some I would say some misfortune, but I think it was actually fortune, in that I was part of a RIF at the company I was working at, a reduction in force, about a year ago. And it allowed me to go and do the amazing thing that you were alluding to. So I guess probably first and foremost, like I said, I'm a mom. I was working, in a very demanding IT career for, 15, 20 years, and just took advantage of an opportunity to take a break and pursue a passion. So I'll leave it at that for now.
All right, I love how you buried it a little bit there, so people are wondering what's going on. Thank you for that. By the way, I didn't even have to preface that or like to plant that seed with you. So I hope this doesn't come out wrong.
No,
You would be considered a normal person. Like, you're not this ultra marathoner, super
nope,
elite that's been doing this your whole life. You are
no,
normal person, mother, you've got a
yep,
career, you've got a family, you've got all the everyday life things that people have to deal with when they're trying to pursue these passions
yes,
that you found. And Katie Van Doren, who's actually a good friend of the show, introduced
yep,
us. And
yep,
when I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm like, I definitely see the little bit of the crazy involved with the
yep,
pushing yourself and seeing what you can do. So um, all right. So you had the year off, which it's
yep.
funny when you said it was kind of, might have been a misfortune, but turned out to be kind of fortunate to allow you to do this. Um, I found that with a lot of people, what seems to be a negative initially is something that you learn from. It gives you a different opportunity than what you had normally done.
Yeah, absolutely. And to go back a little bit to what you were saying earlier about, I'm a mom. And I started running, as I said, in my 30s. So I'm not going to age myself, but a good 20 years ago. I started running in my 30s, and I was running really actually to just get back into shape after I had my second child, my son. Decided I would start, pushing a baby jogger around the block, and kind of grew and grew from there. Had an opportunity to participate in a half Ironman relay. So not the entire half Ironman, but I um, did it as a relay. And so that was a half marathon. So that gave me the first goal. And then once I'd done that, I went, wow, this is kind of cool. Then I decided I wanted to do a marathon. And from there, I started actually finding that, um, as I said, it got I like the challenge, and you hit the nail on the head. I really like that challenge. I'm one of those people who wants to continually challenge myself. So, in my 30s and probably I guess maybe my early 40s, ran about 8 marathons. I was running age group competitive, so I could only really run 1 or 2 a year because I was, up to training 70, 80 miles a week. This is with 2 children. At that time, I had a freelance consulting business, but then I decided to go back to work and more full time and get back into the corporate world. And when I did that, I continued on this train of passion, and decided that, um, actually after a little bit of a break from running, because as I started getting a little bit older, I was finding it was a little bit harder in my joints. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And, I'll tell you I'll make it very brief, but that very first half Ironman I ran, with, as a relay, I ran with 2 other moms. One of them was a very good friend of mine named Sandra, who, was an amazing collegiate level swimmer. One was, my sister-in-law, who really liked cycling, and like me, she was a mom and wanted to actually challenge herself and push herself a little bit more. So the 3 of us signed up for this relay, and, coincidentally, it was on Mother's Day in Panama City, Florida. It was the, Panama City Half Ironman, and so our Mother's Day trip, for about 3 years, because we did it 1 year and decided we'd go back 2 or 3 years late, after that, we, we would take nannies, and basically go bring our kids. A friend of ours gave us a condo at the beach, and we would go, and our Mother's Day gift for ourselves was to go do a half Ironman relay, and it was amazing, and it was super fun. And we all got very passionate. Unfortunately, several years later, my sister-in-law passed away, from sarcoma, and one of the things we had promised each other at, when we finally actually won for the female team relay team, we promised each other that when we won, we would go back, and we would do a half Ironman, do the entire thing ourselves. And she ended up getting sick, and and Hurricane Katrina came, a whole other story. Anyway, I we never did it. And so years later, after she had passed, it stuck with me and it stuck on my heart. And I said, you know what? I know that if she were alive today, she would have done the half Ironman. I probably would have done it with her. And I wanted to do something to honor her. So I got into doing triathlons. And that's actually how I got into cycling, because I hadn't been a cyclist, and cycling was the necessary evil as part of doing a triathlon. I was also a terrible swimmer, so I took a master's swim course, learned how to do that, bought myself a bike, and started cycling, and got into doing triathlons, which was yet another challenge for me. And to bring it back to what you were saying about sort of the negative turning into a positive, I'd done several half Ironmans. I'd done Olympic distance triathlons. I tried one Ironman, and I say tried because I didn't complete it. And I got through the swim, which I thought would be the hardest part. I got through the bike, but it was terrible. Got off the bike, couldn't walk. It was a terrible day. All sorts of things. Anyway, could not walk. Sat down, tried to put my shoes on, and just basically called it before the run. So that was sort of, I felt like I had this negative something hanging over my head, and I wanted for several years after, to come back and do something, and I wasn't sure what that
Yeah.
was. So, anyway, I want to kinda maybe give you a little bit path back to that, to how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, that is quite the lead up. And you can see the progression. I love how you said you didn't really start running into your 30s, and most people
Yeah.
think about as they're in their 30s and get to their 40s that, all right, it's over. This is when I start to get old and I can't. And it's more because people stop doing something, and that's why.
Yep.
I was at
Yep.
I was at recess duty on Friday. I
Yep.
teach elementary school for those who are new, and we have recess duty, and I'm watching the kids, and then I'm thinking back to, like, anytime I see a group of adults together, they're either sitting and talking, or they're on their phones, or they're, at a barbecue, but it's just talking. And then you watch a group of kids.
Yeah.
They talk, but they're running after each other. And it doesn't
It's true.
matter. what the hell? There was one day we couldn't get the shed open because somebody had like jammed the handle. There was no equipment. They just started running around in circles and climbing on stuff, and like it didn't matter. It was just
Right.
play. So that's why at those younger ages you're able to do all that stuff because that's what you're training your body to do. And now, like, as people get older, they stop doing that thing, and they're in their seats for however many hours a day. So
Yep.
your hips get all messed up, and,
Yep.
you gotta train outside of that. But I love that that's where you started, and then, like, you took it all the way. So I think you can tell everybody what you ended up doing. We made
Yeah.
people wait 10 minutes into the show, which was a little mean. That's my fault. I'll take
Uh,
responsibility. But Darlene, that's a heck of a journey to get from your 30s and then to do that sort of thing for your sister-in-law and to have that as motivation as well. That actually gives it a ton of meaning, I imagine.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
sorry, I digress, but tell us what you did. What did you end up doing?
Well, about a year ago, May, I was looking for a bike trip for my husband and I thought, oh, this will be kind of fun. He's not a cyclist. I thought, oh, this will be fun. Maybe we'll go and do a 3, 4 day, cycling trip through Napa. I'd never done a cycling trip before in my life because, like I said, I've never really considered myself a cyclist. I really got into my physical fitness routine and my passion was running. And so, anyway, I stumbled on the Trek Travel website and was, going through all these North American trips that they had, thinking, oh, it's probably easier to just stay somewhere here in North America. And lo and behold, I stumbled across their Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine trip, which is a 48-day, 3,800-mile cycle trip across the northern United States, and
Uh,
that's what I
Sorry,
had the opportunity to do this summer.
I need to repeat that. Portland,
Yeah,
Oregon to Portland,
to
Maine.
Portland, Maine.
For
Yes.
those
Yeah.
not very good at geography, that's west coast of the United
D-
States to the East
Yep.
Coast, and it's not the close East Coast. That's like
No.
that's
That's yeah.
northern
Yeah, and you
northeastern.
do sort of take a little dip down around the Great Lakes, so you do go a little bit south and then head a little bit north again. But yes, it's 3,800 miles, 48 days, 155,000 feet in elevation that you gain, across the 48 days, and 15 states we crossed. So yeah, it was quite an adventure.
That is insane. So, all right, there are a lot of questions that I I have with this. First of all, like, this was the vacation you told your husband about? Like, how did that come?
Well, no,
Was he
actually,
like, "Now, Darlene, I'm out. I'll cheer
yeah,
you on."
no, he actually, it's funny because I actually didn't even tell him I was looking. This was just something I wanted to propose to him as an idea, like the idea of doing this cycling vacation. Because as I said, he's not a cyclist.
Yeah.
He's a golfer, he's a tennis player, he's a pickleball, he's run marathons in his youth, that sort of thing. But that's not his thing anymore. Anyway, I actually sat on this news or this information, this trip for probably about 3 months before I even said anything to him.
Wow.
And well, it was one of those things where it was on my heart, it was in my head for 3 months, and I swear I went back almost every day to the website and looked at it again and again and read more and was like, "What can I do? And could I do this?" And, I couldn't get it off. I wanna say out of my head, but I really couldn't get it off my heart. It was one of those things that just in my being of beings, I said, "I have to do this." From the moment I saw it, I said, "I've got to do this." And so I finally told him probably July or August last year, and so it was a year ahead of the trip. And I said, "Look, I found this trip, and I was looking for a trip for you and I, and I found this trip, and I thought this might be kind of interesting." Um, and he said, "Yep, sign up, just do it." He goes, and I said, "Well,
That's
but I'm
awesome.
I'm working." And so at the time I had a full-time job and very demanding career and working in a global professional services organization for cloud technology. It was kind of very sort of substantial role. I think I was like, for me at least, others might go, no big deal. But for me, it was something that I had been looking forward to doing, and I was really enjoying my role. And um, anyway, but I said, and he said, just sign up, and we'll figure that out later. And I thought, Okay. So I went I signed up, but there was a wait list. And by the way, when I say I signed up for 2025. So even though it was August of 2024, I was signing up for the 2025 trip because obviously, and we can touch on this too at some point, is you don't just decide to sign up and ride 3,800 miles like
Yeah.
3 weeks later. And
You plan and train a
there's
little bit.
substantial, yeah, substantial preparation and training and things like that. So he was very supportive, and fast forward to I think it was end of October, early November. The company I was working for went through some restructuring and decided to reduce a whole area of the business, which I happened to be involved in, and so was offered a role to stay on, was offered an opportunity to to leave, and I said. I kind of wanted to do this trip, so okay, and anyway, but interestingly enough, I actually the day I got my notice, which was, in November, and my last day was January. The day I got my notice, I sent an email to Trek Travel because I was on a waiting list for 2025, and I said, "Hey, how's that waiting list looking? Because I don't have this pesky little job anymore, so I'm actually free."
I'm pretty
And
make it.
yeah, and so, I got a call, a few days later from the fellow who organizes it for Trek Travel, and he called me and he said, "You're not gonna believe this." He said, "Your timing is so fortuitous because we have 2 spots open. I was gonna call you today and see if you want one." And I said, "Yes, I'm in." And so it was as actually, I guess it was right around Thanksgiving, last year that I found out I was able to go, and so I I was actually traveling for business at the time, and I called my husband and I said, "Okay, I've got they've got a spot.
Yeah, yeah.
I've taken it. I've got to put a deposit down. Are we all good with this?" And he said, "Yep." So that was sort of really when it started to become real,
Oh,
because
yeah, I think
I knew I'd
I
been on a waiting list for a little while. So yeah,
I'm sure putting the deposit down and just saying, "Yep, I want it," like, that's and you
yeah,
said, was it 48 days? Is that what you said?
it is 48 days. Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
I could do the math, but I don't wanna do it that quickly in my head. How
yeah.
many miles do you ride in a day on average?
So and actually this is a great thing too because the website is very clear about this. They say this is a level 4 trip, which is, the most advanced for most advanced riders, which I didn't really consider myself. And they said it's on average 80 miles a day, 3,000 to 3,500 feet in elevation average. And so, and that's, because what it actually ended up working out to be was, and so let me clarify. So we have 48 days. It was 47, the 48th day is your breakfast and say your goodbyes to everybody and things like that. So the trip is 48 days, but the riding really starts on day 1 and goes through day 47, and you have 4 rest days in between. So you actually do have 4 rest days. So you're really riding for 43 days. But it's
So long.
average yeah, average of 80 miles a day, but some days are 30. We had a couple of days that were 30 miles, and then we had a couple of days we had one day that was 127 miles, which I think was our longest day. So, and then
Those
we would do
flatter
back-to-back
days
century rides.
where you're not
Mhm.
having much of an incline or an elevation for those long
Um,
or to
some of them, yes.
yeah,
We did have days that were, 90, 100 miles long where there was one day we did a 20-mile climb, up over Bighorn Pass. So it's 20 miles, 6,000 feet in elevation. And that day, I believe, I can't remember the exact distance, but I remember it was, that the climb started early, finished early, but we still had, it was a 90 or 100-mile day. So it was not
how long did that
insignificant. So
take? That's
well, that day was, the climb itself was, took me according to Strava, based on what the Strava segments were, it was 2 hours and 54 minutes for that climb.
that
Yeah.
doesn't seem long at all. It sounds like you crushed that right there.
Well, I don't know, 20 miles because 'cause you're going on average, like, I was looking down, at my trip computer, and I was averaging 6 miles an hour, like, and I was going, "Gonna be a long 20 miles."
Yeah.
This is,
Oh, yeah,
that's
no, I
the
get what you're saying, but 20 miles uphill is it's a lot it's a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
It is, and, there was, well, and so, was an interesting experience for me because we you know, I mentioned the idea that you don't just sign up for this and, say, 3 weeks later, "Okay, I'm gonna go ride 3,800 miles." I actually as soon as I signed up in August, I started training. Now, I had already had a fairly decent base because I'd been doing, Ironmans. Well, I attempted the Ironman, did several half Ironmans, Olympic distances, things like that. So I had a fairly solid base to build on. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to just continue to work as though I'm going. I'm going to just keep
Oh,
working on my body as though I'm going, even though I didn't find out really till November that I was going. And so I started that. And then in November, I found out I was going, and I immediately called. There's a coaching business a company called NVDM Coaching, and they were who I had been using. It's a wonderful woman named Natasha who started this during COVID, an amazing triathlete, former tennis player, and started this coaching business for triathletes. And now she's got, I mean, I don't know how, like thousands of athletes or something. It's amazing. And so I'd been trained and coached by them in the past, and so for my triathlon. So I emailed Natasha and I said, "Hey, I have this really interesting opportunity. Very different kind of training."
yeah,
I said, "Would you be, would you all be interested or, able to actually help train me for this and get me ready?" And she said, "Absolutely." So I started working with a coach named Mackenzie, who was this amazing woman who just was full of enthusiasm and just, she was great. And Trek Travel had actually sent us training programs that we could do on our own, and so, I shared this with Mackenzie, and I said, "I'm happy to just, you can take this, you can do whatever you want with it, but just I trust you,
yeah,
and I wanna show up on day 1, I wanna be ready to ride, and I wanna be able to finish, and I wanna ride every inch of this ride. I don't wanna get in the van ever,
yeah,
ever." And so, that was my goal, and so we sort of started easing into it in November, and then come January, we really started ramping things up and got much more into a much more solidified program, where I was strength training 4 days a week. I was riding, 4 to 5 days a week. I was running probably a day or 2 a week, and I was swimming as well. So
oh,
the
wow.
idea was, don't have me on my bike the entire time because and actually, I was glad because I thought I'm just going to be sick of cycling by the time I show up
Yeah,
to
yeah,
ride my bike for 48 days. So, anyway, um, we worked from that, and she did sort of a modified version of what they had provided, and it was, it was just it was amazing. But that was the thing, and that training really got me ready to be able to do these climbs. And where I was going with this too is I live in Central Texas, which is hilly, but we don't have a lot of areas to climb. And I had never really done any serious climbing on a bike before ever because I my whole goal was flat and fast for triathlons. It was just go fast and some rolling hills and things like that. But so climbing was a tough part of this trip for me, but I discovered actually that, I think I call myself a closet climber. I discovered I'm actually really a closet I like to climb, and,
that
you know
that's good, that's good. It
Yep.
seems like you're finding out all these different
Yes.
things that you enjoy pushing yourself with.
Yes, absolutely. So,
I
yeah.
loved hearing that the training wasn't just cycling where you had to do strength training and running, and so I'm
Yeah.
sure there was, some flexibility work in there too, or stretching
Yeah.
and mobility stuff. Because
Yeah.
being on a bike in that position for that many hours a day, I think could have some serious negative side effects if you weren't properly prepared.
Yes. Yeah. We did 1 day a week, my strength training was mobility. So, every Monday was mobility work, and so it was really just working on, strength, but, with a real twist and a focus on mobility. And it is interesting because there were some things that, I should note too that this trip, there were 22 of us who did the trip. We had 5 guides. And um, the age ranges were, the youngest was a woman who was 42, and the eldest was a gentleman who was 74. And I
Wow.
will tell you, he rode every inch of
Good
that ride
for
too.
him.
And he was amazing. And so we had some fun. I've got some fun stories I could share with you about him. Um, so, we all discovered, to your point about being on a bike in that position every day for, you're on a bike for 5 to 8 hours a day. And that's a long
Strenuously.
time.
It's not just sitting,
Yes,
you're pushing.
yes, yes. And one of the interesting things I discovered was, and I'm actually, as I'm sort of squeezing my hands here, is the impact on your hands and your arms.
I
And
Good for the hands.
no, and I didn't either. This was something that, and in fact, there were people. There was a woman, the woman who was the woman who was 42 on the ride, the youngest woman, literally could not grasp her hands and hold a fork properly. So like she actually started eating like differently with her holding her fork differently because she could not grasp. I lost really fine motor skills. Numbness still in my fingers, in my fingertips.
Wow.
My thumb doesn't bend properly. Like
Oh,
from,
no.
yeah. I mean, it's all coming back slowly, but like you start to realize that because you're pushing with on the handlebars, you're pushing in here, and so and then you're grasping, for the brakes or to, change gears and things like that all the time. So your hands are always moving, but it's just interesting. You just have all these, you've got pressure on the heel of your hands, on, in between your thumb and your forefinger. And it really kind of messes with you. And, you're holding your body weight for 5 to 8 hours a day, your upper body weight like that all day. Um, so, everything from the waist down got very strong and fit, and everything from the waist up just turned to jelly. It's like,
Yeah, I would have thought your legs would have been jelly, but not like thinking about it, especially those uphill days, you've gotta have a grip on the handles there. Maybe sometimes where you're coasting, you can loosen up, but those
yeah,
uphills, that's gonna
yeah.
wow. So
Well,
was
and
it
then we had a lot big descents too. Sorry to cut you off there. We
no,
had
you're
some
good.
very significant descents, miles and 6 to 9% grade declines. And so you're just flying down these hills and, holding on for dear life to those
Yeah.
brakes, going, please.
Now, did everybody come out in one piece and in good health? Aside from, I know, the residual effects of
Yeah.
being on a bike that long, but no accidents or anything like that?
No, no, there was one gentleman who started with us, and really, really wonderful individual who had had some health issues before he started that had been discovered, I think not that long, like 6 weeks before the ride started. He
Oh,
started with us. He got, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks in and then said, This is just not for me right now because of my health
yeah.
challenges and things." So he ended up leaving, and it was like everybody just full respect for
Oh,
the choice because it was a difficult choice to get that far in and to
yeah.
start to experience it and then say, and he was struggling. Some days he was great and some days he struggled. But in terms of coming out, yes, no real accidents, no real injuries. I will say there was one day we were riding on, and look, we rode on interstates. We did ride on the shoulder of interstates in the western United States because that actually is legal. I did not know that. And
Oh,
so
alright.
um, it is not legal in most of the eastern states.
I
So
was
I was
gonna
very
say, I've
thankful.
never seen a cyclist on the
I
highway
know.
in
Legal or
Massachusetts,
not,
Maine.
I know, and
Yeah.
legal or not, you probably won't because it's not the most enjoyable way to ride for sure.
No, I
But
can't
we
imagine.
rode we rode a lot of state highways, side roads, things like that. But we actually rode on paths. There were some um,
Oh, that's
paved paths that go, particularly. I think it was in I want to say it was in Ohio. And there were these just paths that went on like for 150 miles. Now we didn't ride all that on the path, but
yeah.
we would ride, 20-mile stretch. And there was one day it had rained overnight and the path was wet. And I have to tell you, weather-wise, we were so fortunate because we got one day where it rained on us for like 20 minutes. And then of course this one
Really?
day where it rained overnight and we were riding down these paths the next day and the roads were wet. And given that we started the ride on August 21st and we finished on October 6th, so we were riding actually through early fall. We rode all through September, which is kind of which is a little bit
You
unusual to think about.
you
Mhm.
just finished this a
Yeah,
couple
I
weeks
just
ago.
finished like 3 weeks ago. Yeah, yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, I think it was 3 weeks ago today. So That's why I said I'm still getting the
Yeah.
my feeling back in my fingertips, and but so riding down this path, and there were a few corners where it was little, a little a little dicey, and there were leaves and it was wet, and we were in a small group, because we ended up riding in groups. You'd ride in pace groups, roughly with your same pace, and, I happened to be in a group that was just a smaller pace group, and I which we had an amazing time, and, but there was one group that was riding behind us that was a big group, and I said, "Gosh," I said, "I'm so worried. This is not the path you wanna be riding on in a big group," because it was, some of these turns were just like if you caught a leaf wrong, you'd slide and it was muddy underneath and things like that. And so anyway, um, we got back to the hotel that night, and lo and behold, one of the women had come around a corner, slid, kind of, I guess, lost. I don't know exactly what happened, but kind of lost control of her bike, and 2 women rode over her, so that was sort of like, and it
Oh,
was and apparently it was the very corner that I had said, "Well, I'm really worried because this is not this is not, a good safe, doesn't seem safe." But anyway, that was the worst of it, thank goodness. I mean,
well,
everybody, there was really no other injuries. You do come out with, you can develop saddle sores, after riding,
I
which,
can imagine that.
I don't know, I'll let your listeners, look that up. I won't describe that, but
I can
it's not a
imagine.
very fun it's not a very fun condition. It just comes from sitting on your bike all day,
Yeah.
every day, and, so that can be very uncomfortable, and one of the fellows I rode with, was, I think he had saddle sores for almost the entire trip, and it
Oh,
was like, it's painful. It's a painful experience. So anyway, I was,
oh.
but
That's
anyway,
tough on, like, an hour, I imagine, but when you're,
yeah,
like, 40 days left and that's what you're dealing with, that's
yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah.
Oh.
So
So, that was there it was just a challenge you wanted to try, you saw it, and it kind of like you said, it wasn't just on your mind, it was, like it was
yeah,
in your
this
heart, like, it's just something you needed to do?
yeah, and I think there was something that had been, when I shared that I hadn't completed the Ironman, and I had been thinking to myself since then, do I want to go back and do another Ironman? Do I want to do, because
Yeah.
I felt like unfinished business, and
Yes.
so, and then I saw this and I thought, so there was an aspect of it was the challenge, and it was a little bit of like, well, I didn't finish the Ironman, but I could just bike across the country. That I think
That
that'll
yeah,
settle it up pretty
that's
nicely.
pretty
But
cool, yeah.
um, but no, there was I I thought, I thought, what an amazing experience to be able to see the country from, from a bicycle,
That's
and
true.
to spend, we are so conditioned these days, I mean, you have the benefit of, in your role as in teaching, and you were talking about being outside at recess and being outside with the kids, running around, and which is amazing. We have become inside people,
Yeah,
and I love being outdoors. And so this was an opportunity to see, parts of the country. I didn't, and I now know, like, this is sort of a retrospective. I wanted to see this and I wanted to do this because I thought this would be just amazing, riding through mountains and across, South Dakota. And we grow too much corn in this country as well, by the way. Some more corn than I care to imagine. But anyway, um, but what I thought, what an amazing opportunity to just put your life on hold for 48 days and just go do something.
yeah,
And
that's
so
true.
I don't know if you're familiar with, Sarah Blakely is a woman who started a company called Spanx, and
Yes.
her husband Jesse, and Itzler, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, is a very big motivational speaker, but also big into doing like these amazing things. Like he's been kind of an inspiration for me. They actually had, David Goggins come and live with them for a while. Like she
Really?
told yeah, she told this story, a great story of how, like, Jesse came home one day and said, "Yeah, I've got this like ex-Marine who's going to come and live with us for like 6 weeks or something." It turns out it was David Goggins. Like, and I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with David Goggins, but
I've
like
mentioned Goggins a few times
a
on
few times, yeah. So, anyway, but Jesse Itzler talked about, and he did this. He was doing a podcast one day, or he was being interviewed one day, and I remember he was talking about, this idea of the Misogi, which is a Japanese idea of doing just something really big, very different, stepping outside your comfort zone, challenging yourself.
Yeah.
And Jesse Itzler talks about the idea of doing that once a year. And then he goes on to talk about the idea of doing, something lesser, but still kind of significant, every other month, and then doing something, sort of even lesser, but still significant every month. But this idea of the misogi just stuck with me of like, and he said, if you just did this, and if you're 48 now and you did this for the rest of you live till you're 80, imagine how many amazing experiences you'd have between the time you're 48 and the time you're 80. And that was really inspiring for me. And then I think I had seen that before I found this trip. And then I went, "Oh, this trip is like it," and it just dawned on me. I didn't it took me a while to click that this was gonna be my Misogi, and that now I have to come up with one every year.
I was
So I'm
gonna
not sure
say,
it's gonna be, and I don't know
you
to you,
didn't
but
set the bar low for yourself,
I
Darlene.
know, I
Pick
know,
the biggest one you
I know,
possibly could.
I know,
Now
I
you're gonna
know,
have
which
to go
was
northern Canada down to, the bottom of Argentina.
yeah, well,
Chilly
it's
down
funny.
that way.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because when I was on the trip, people were, there were a number of people who'd done truck travel trips and other cycling tours before. And so at the beginning, they were like, how many cycling tours have you done? And I'm like, this is my first. They were like,
Wow.
it's like,
You're crazy.
I know,
That's
just
awesome,
why
though.
not? Just why not? But for me, it was like it was the unknown. It was the challenging myself. Um, it was being outside, it was getting to experience and, all that we have around us, and, I had some ideas of what it was gonna be like, but what it actually was just exceeded my expectations beyond my wildest dreams,
And
in that sense.
you were able to, because I imagine, once you're getting to the end of the riding each day, it's kind of exhausting. You were still able to appreciate the scenery and being outside and just the newness of everything?
You know, not every day,
Not every
no, no,
day.
but, no, and, yeah, because there were days that early on, it was just trying to get used to and find a cadence and find a rhythm and sort of figure out, okay, how am I going to do this for 47, ride for 47 days? And so there was that. And then, you like anything, you'd have good days, you'd have bad days, you just have days where you felt flat, you'd have days where you felt amazing, you don't know why, and so there were days where, well, and interestingly enough, as we got to the end of the ride, our group, the pace group that I rode with, we found that we've got stronger as the ride went on because we rode just below our threshold pace. So
Yeah.
because of that, we weren't pushing ourselves, recognizing that we had 47 days of this. It's not a race. It's not a race. It's a
Yeah.
ride. And your goal is to get up in the morning, to be able to get on that bike, ride all day, feel good, get well rested, make sure that you've got, you're fueling yourself, you've got the right hydration, that you're resting, and that you've got a good pace. And so you can get up and you can do it all over again. Um,
Yes.
but, there were days like, I will say there were longer days where sometimes I was like, oh my gosh, like I would be counting down the miles because it was just like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm ready to be off my bike. I'm ready to be off my bike. And, but, you know, this is where I th I really had an epiphany early on about, how to manage this, and actually, I'm gonna start to write about it because I think there's a lot in this is, if you've done your homework and you're prepared and you've done your physical training, great. You do what you can do on that front. You show up. Everything else is really about the conditions that you face. And so it's, is it going to be, hilly? Is it going to be flat? Is it going to be windy? There's all of those conditions that are outside your control. And so you've got to just deal with those. And that's sort of something that just comes at you every day. But what I discovered was there were four things that I could control. Five really, but there was, I'll kind of share how I differentiated it. But the four things in my control were my rest, my pacing, my fueling, and my hydration. That's it. That's
Yeah.
all I could control was, am I getting enough rest at night? Am I sleeping well? And oddly enough, I didn't sleep well. Like, you someday you think, "Oh, you must have slept so well because you were just doing all this, like, physical, exertion and mental exertion as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
because you have to be, aware of what's going on, and you're riding in a pace line, so you've gotta be aware of the people in front of you, people behind you, what's going on, the traffic, everything. So, there's that. Then there's the pacing, which is, am I going out too fast in the morning? So to your point, am I going to feel really exhausted by the end of the day? Or am I going to feel like this is, when you're doing 115 miles or 127 miles, you can't go out fast in the morning. But you
No.
may get up in the morning and think, oh, it's nice and cool and I feel really good. And, and everybody's, feeling kind of chipper and excited. And I kind of went back to my marathon days about, just remembering how to pace and how to, run negative splits. And I was usually the one in the pace line sort of saying, hey, this is great. I love that it's flat. We're going 18, 20 miles an hour, but we still have 95 more miles to do today. So how about we just dial it back a little
Dial
bit?
it
Because
back a little
we
bit.
don't know how we're going to feel in a little bit. And everybody's like, oh, you're right. I was kind of afraid to say anything. And so then you kind of start to trust the people you're riding with, that, you can be open. And so there's a rest pacing. um, how are you fueling yourself? Like, are you eating enough? Because every day we were averaging, I would look on, my Garmin and my Strava every day. Um, and we were averaging burning, 2,500 to 5,000 calories a day, just
Just
riding,
riding, yeah,
just
so your
riding. So
your
never
body's
mind the,
burning
yeah, exactly,
on
exactly. Your
normal, yeah.
just existence. So, and early on, this was one of the things that I had to figure out very early on. Is one of my early days, we did a climb in Eastern Oregon,
Yeah,
and Eastern Oregon is, I don't know if you've ever been to Eastern Oregon, but it's dry, it's rolling hills, it's kind of, it's not real, it's pretty, but it can also get very hot. And it was the end of August, and the days we rode through Eastern Oregon were like 99, 100-degree days. And we had one of our first difficult climbing days. This was the first moment where I kind of started to doubt myself, and I wasn't sure. I thought, maybe I'm not ready for this. Maybe, and we stopped at a rest stop, and we were like mile 60 something in. So we had rest stops roughly every 20 miles. So every 20 miles, the guides would have a van. They would have, all sorts of snacks. They would have water. They would have like hydrate, all sorts of things for us.
yeah.
Um, and this was the last rest stop before we started this climb. And there was a beautiful river next to the rest stop. And I thought, I'm going to go get in the river, and I'm going to go sit in the river with a few of the other riders, because it's hot out. This is going to be, I'll just get like, get my kit covered in water head to toe. It'll be like air conditioning. It'll be great. Everybody went. There were 3 other women I was riding with, and they were like, "It's too hot. I can't." They just said, "The heat's getting to me and, or to us. We're gonna ride in the van. We're not gonna do the climb." And I went, "Okay," because it was just me left, like, and one guide, because there was one guide who would ride in the front and one
Yeah.
guide who'd ride in the back as like a sweeper. So I looked at the guy, the sweeper guide, and I said, "So, I am going to do the climb." And I said,
Oh
because
my
my
goodness.
goal was to ride every inch. And it looks like it's just you and me. So let's go. So, um, but we started and we got the first, it was pretty steep, like 6, 7%, like, first little bit. And this climb was an 8-mile climb. So it was a good distance of climbing. We get up and I start, I'm pedaling. I'm in the easiest gear, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I really just, within the first quarter of a mile, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And he said, just low and slow, darling, low and slow. And so I was watching my heart rate monitor, my heart rate on my bike trip computer, and I had my water, and I was, to just keep riding and riding. I was going, okay. And then it started to level off a bit. And so I was like, okay, got past that, and the climbs are never just like this. Like, they, go up and, you get
Yeah.
a little bit of relief, and then you get some inclines again. Anyway, we started gaining on one of the guys, and so this guide said to me, he goes, "Look," he goes, "you're doing so well." He goes, "You're actually gaining on people from the group ahead." And I said, "I'm not so sure I'm gaining as much as he's falling back." I
No,
said,
you're
"That's
gaining, you're
yeah."
gaining.
So yeah. So anyway, this gentleman ended up riding with us, and what we did was we basically rode for 15, 20 minutes. We'd stop as soon as we got a little bit of relief, like, and we'd still be on an incline. Had a little bit of water, let our heart rate come down because it was at this point it was over 100 degrees, and
Oh,
it was just so stupid hot. And so I thought, I'm not sure I can do this, and but anyway, I did and got in. We still once we finished the climb, we still had 17 miles of rolling hills beyond that. So it was not a great rest of the afternoon. So, like you said, that was one of the afternoons where I was like, I'm not so sure I'm really enjoying the rest of the scenery
yeah.
here. I just want to be
No, I
off my
got
bike
you.
and done. But anyway, the reason I share this story because that for me was I recognized aside from it just being hot, I learned a few things about the fueling and hydration. And, if anybody who's doing endurance sports or any sort of, sports like that knows that once you don't change what you did in training when you do your race. And what I did, unfortunately, was I had been training and eating nothing but peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because that was the only thing that my stomach could tolerate on these long rides here in Central Texas in the heat. It worked for me. When I got on the ride and they had the snack table set out, they had peanut butter M&Ms, or like they had like peanut butter pretzels. They had all sorts of different snacks that I
Yes.
had never trained with. And I
Uh,
realized that I wasn't taking enough and it was the wrong kind of fuel for me. And so the other thing I had been doing is because it was so hot, I was drinking a package of electrolytes in every bottle and I was going through a bottle an hour. So I was actually over electrolyting myself.
oh,
So
okay.
that day I felt terrible. So I said, okay, pause. When I got to the hotel, I said, we're going to do something different. Tomorrow, nothing but peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We're going back to what we know and we're doing electrolytes every other bottle. I did the rest of the trip that way. Never an issue again,
Oh,
ever. So anyway, that was so the four things you can control: the rest, the pacing, the fueling, and the hydration. That's it. And then you could argue the fifth one, but it's harder to control, but it's also equally important, is the mental aspect of it.
yeah. I
And
was
it's
going to
how
say
do you
the
get through
mindset.
that, mentally? And that's the tough one. That's
Yeah,
the tough one.
you
It's where
can.
Goggins comes in.
Yeah, you can hear him cursing you out every time you wanted to stop, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's incredible. Well, I've taken a ton of your time this afternoon, so I wanna be respectful of that, but I do have to ask, what's next? Like, you've gotta pick your next one. Do you have any ideas, or are you still
I
letting this kinda settle?
I'm letting this settle. I
Okay.
will say, I did come back and bought a road bike, because I had a tri bike and a different kind of bike, and I rode a road bike on this, and so I did come back and bought a road bike because I really want to do more road cycling. Um, and I'm actually looking at maybe doing some racing because I actually think it could be kind of fun, and um, and then one of the fellows that I rode with actually Um, I was messaging him, on Strava, I think, the other day, and, he was one of the guys that wrote in the group with me, and he posted, he said, "I think I found my next thing." And so I messaged him, like, on WhatsApp, and I said, "What is it? What is it?" 'Cause we all had a group at message and what and he told me, and it's called Race Across America, and it's a bike ride, that goes from California to New Jersey. But you actually race it. So it's not just he said, "This is gonna make what we did look like, summer camp," or something like that. So, but anyway, so but I'm not sure. The other thing I've been doing in my quote unquote spare time, what I was doing was, my husband has a business. I'm helping him with his business, but we bought, in my quest to be outside and explore and be more adventurous, we bought a Sprinter cargo van, and I've converted it to a camper van. So
Nice.
we're now about to set out on and go on some trips to kind
I
of get
was
out.
gonna
And
say that
yeah,
had to be the next logical step once you
yeah,
saw the whole country, was
yeah.
to get out
Well,
there and
now
do.
I want to go back to different things and I want to discover. But there is one thing I would love to share with you if you've got just a couple more minutes there, because this was one of the things that I found really interesting. And Um, I think you being an elementary school teacher will appreciate this, and maybe some of the demographics of your listeners might appreciate this as well. But um, years ago, probably when dinosaurs were walking the earth, the Muppet Movie came out,
Ah,
and And I, as a child, loved the Muppet Movie. I mean, I could even now I could watch it over and over again because it's such a great story. And the I had this vision when I got on I started this cycling trip. I had this vision of like Kermit the Frog riding a bike. And so it was I don't know what it was, but I just kind of, had I just figured that that's probably what I look like on a bike. I look like Kermit the Frog riding a bike or something like that. So, and I was really back to the why would I want to do this? I started thinking about I started thinking about that movie and I was thinking about like Kermit the Frog and we're going to Hollywood and the story of and
Yeah.
all of this and it was such a great story and so people would ride and they'd come by us and they'd say, hey, you guys are all have matching bikes like and we're on a bike trip and they'd be
Yeah.
like, where are we going, where are you going? And I'd say, we're going to Hollywood to make movies, you should come with us. And and most people didn't know the Muppet movie so they didn't quite understand that, but the closing scene to that movie has, there's the chorus at the very end that it says, "Life's like a movie, keep pretending, keep believing." No, "Life's like a movie, write your own ending, keep believing, keep pretending. We've done out just what we set to do. Thanks to the lovers, the dreamers, and you." And I have to tell you, that song, that little chorus
Oh,
played in my
that's
head
cool.
over and over and over again, and I thought about that, and that's what got me through those climbs. So, I don't know, as I'm starting to finish my camper van and sit down to put pen to paper to actually write what everything I've experienced and put it all, that's gonna play a very important part, and
That's
so,
awesome.
anyway,
I
I
love it.
thought I thought that
That's your
might
theme
be a
song.
nice way to close out the discussion, particularly with you as an elementary school teacher, because you could probably appreciate that too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just taking a note of the Muppet movie. So Darlene,
Look, my
thank
23-year-old son still watches it, so
oh,
he
that's good.
so yeah, yeah.
So how can people get in touch with you if they wanna reach out? What would
So,
be the
I my handle on Instagram is just a little dab, DAB, and I also have a website, justalittledab.com, and there's contact us there, or you can just do Darlene at justalittledab.com. But my next I'm going to start working on building this out. I did do a lot of content on the ride. I kind of now want to transition to the completion of my camper van, and then sort of shift and transition into what I really gained from this experience, and I want to share that with people. So I hope that your listeners will will follow along and see that. I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks to start populating that and putting some content together because I think there's a lot of really interesting things out there. So, but I really
well,
appreciate the time, Derek. Thank you.
yeah, of course, and looking forward to kind of following along and seeing how everything comes out.
Well,
So,
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for the time and thanks for the interest. So,
of
um,
course, and thank everybody for taking the time to listen. As always, we know time's the most valuable thing you have, and sharing with us means a lot. So please reach out to Darlene, like, follow, subscribe, you know the whole routine. And Darlene, thank you so much.
thank you, Derek. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.